Good morning. This is the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission hearing for April 2023. I will be your host today. I'm John Park, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And will you take it away, Mr. Villalobos?
And thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the commission. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County of Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Samaria, and Orchid areas. Rebroadcast of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays after 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Moving on to the roll call. Commissioner Cooney, who I believe is remote in Santa Barbara today.
I am. Thank you. I'm here.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Bradley. Commissioner Farini.
Here.
And Chair Park.
Present.
And we think Commissioner Martinez is just running late this morning.
We have no reason not to believe that. All right. Well, then, let us go to our able secretary who will render our agenda status report, followed by a stirring rendition of the projection report.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. It might be more of a stirring rendition on item number 1 that I've been practicing for.
Okay, well,
So in regards to the status of the agenda, we'll have a stirring rendition of a ordinance amendment for extending the COVID-19. And then item number 2 is a general plan rezone application acceptance or initiation. And staff and the applicants are available on both those projects to present them today. And so that concludes the status of the agenda. I can move to the projection report, Mr. Chair.
please do.
Our next scheduled hearing is on April 26th, and that is going to be in the Santa Barbara hearing room. There are 3 items projected for that date. We had continued the appeals of the Plains Pipeline valve upgrade to that date. And then we have a property line adjustment as well as the Parks Department has or the Isla Vista Recreation and Parks Department has a project on that date, project on Fernald Road in Isla Vista. And then moving down the projection report, May 3rd, we will again be in Santa Barbara. 3 items projected for that. There's a government code consistency on that date, Gaviota Coast Conservancy appeal of the Moore Ranch project, and then we do have another appeal of the Gaviota Coast Conservancy appeal of the DMF Fund Restoration Project. That's on May 3rd. And then May 10th, we will return to Santa Maria for the continuation of the North Fork Ranch Frost Ponds on that date. And then on May 31st, we'll be back in Santa Barbara for safety element update and wildfire policies. That's the only item projection on that date. And then on June 7th, we have the shopping center cycle bar projected on that date. That's in Santa Barbara. And then on June 14th, we have 1 item, which is the appeal of the transfer of the Las Flores pipeline system. We may be working with staff on those dates in order to combine them for efficiency. And then, Chair, as we've discussed offline, there may be some opportunities for workshops on either May 31st or June 14th. So as we firm those up, then we can work with staff on maybe consolidating those things if need be. So we're not having 1 item per agenda. And then moving down to June 28th, there is no items projected for that date. So that takes us to the end of the projection report, Mr. Chair.
And when you're speaking of consolidating, that would be the June 7 and June 14 hearings. Is it? They're both in Santa Barbara and they're both short.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. We would look at consolidating those two. I think the safety element does have a trajectory to get to the board. So we'd like to try to keep that date.
Right. So if you were consolidating the June 7 and June 14 one, would it be on the 14th, you think, or what would you aim for?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we would like to, and this goes also trying to plan the workshops. And
Right.
so if we're going to have the workshop, I think the preference would be that we would consolidate them onto June 14th and add a workshop on that date. And that would leave June 7th as an empty item. But I'd work with staff to see if there's any other items to be added to either of those dates before we start moving those things around.
Well, and then this appeal of transfer the permit for Los Flores pipeline. We've got an estimate of 4 hours, so that might be sort of exhausting on its own. Okay. And I don't know which are the easiest things to move on that, whether it's easier to move the cycle bar or that appeal, who knows?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, it'd be easier to move the cycle bar. However, I do need to take a step back and look at that appeal. Adding a workshop to that day could be a marathon event for us.
It
Could be a long day. So we may want to take a step back and look at these items. The shopping center, that's going to be relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
But the workshops and the Los Flores line is going to be a little bit more complicated.
Well, there's no reason for the commission to act now to move to do anything on that, because I think you'll just have to sort of through maybe a workshop on June 7 with the cycle bar. You don't move the cycle bar. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, well, very good. Did any other commissioners have questions of Secretary Wilson?
I do,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, when you have a chance.
Yes. And I don't have a light for you today, of course, so you should just speak up when you're ready to speak.
Yes, I'll apologize in advance for interrupting. I did want Mr. Wilson to note that June 14th, I will be out of the country and not available. So to the extent that workshops are scheduled around the 14th, that would be great with me, but I understand there are other issues as well.
All right, let's move on to our public comment. And public comment is the time for members of the public to speak to things that are not on our agenda today. So if you want to speak about item number 1 or item number 2, then you don't speak up now. You wait until those items are duly announced. But if you've got something else to speak about, then now's your time. We hold our total public comment to 15 minutes, and I'd ask any one person that speaks in public comment to hold it to 3. Do we have anyone here for this session of public comment?
I have not received any speaker slips from people in the room, and we don't have anyone in attendance on Zoom.
Okay, well then let's move on to our next item, which is Planning Commissioners Informational Reports. Do any of our commissioners have information they'd like to relay at this time about what's going on in their district or their world? Okay, well then let's move on to the minutes. Does anyone have comments on the minutes of March 29, 2023?
I do, Mr. Chair, have a very minor adjustment to the minutes of March 29. On the second page, item 2, in the title, Appeals of Terra Firma Long Beach LLC. That's just a misspelling of appeals.
Good eye.
was gonna say, you beat me to it. He's the same.
All right. And does anyone else have any comments on the minutes from the commission? Then do I hear a motion for approval with that minor change noted by Commissioner Cooney. I heard so moved. And is there a second?
Second.
All right. And I guess we have to do a roll call, don't we?
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley, Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Chair Park.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
And now we're at the time for our director's report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission.
Good morning.
I have a few things to report on today. You probably all know that the draft housing element was submitted to the state on March 31st. We did get some press coverage over that. So that was good to get the word out. We had over 430 public comments. So it was a productive public comment period. And I think we learned quite a bit and made some changes to our draft document as a result of that. We did go back to the board on the 4th last week to explain or highlight the key changes that we made that we wanted the public and the board to be aware of. I can tell you that as part of this process, we added 19 new sites to the list of potential rezone sites or proposed project sites. 7 of those are county-owned sites that we were able to, we had one in and we were able to identify a few others that the board will be able to consider in the planning commission. We ended up with 2 sites in Montecito because both the Miramar and the Biltmore expressed their intention to build some employee housing. So that we thought that was quite positive. We got a site in Isla Vista, and then there was a couple of additional sites in Goleta that were identified. So now that that is complete, the state has 90 days to review the document. Oh, we had some sites in North County. I failed to mention. I want to make sure I note that. But I think we had 3 or 4 additional sites in North County. So HCD's got 90 days to review it. We are hoping that we will be working with them closely throughout this process. They've indicated, we met with the head of the review division, housing element review division just before we submitted, just after we submitted. And he said that they are going to try and get us some kind of checklist or comments within the first 30 days so that we can do at least one round of review and coordination during that 90-day period. We're hopeful that will occur. We don't know if it's definite because the division is very overloaded with housing elements that they're reviewing from all over the state. So we will just wait and see, and we'll keep you posted on what it is we learn from HCD. I did want to mention the 3 new policies that we've added to the housing element. And this came, you probably know about 2 of them because they came out of the original hearing we had with the board in February. But one is developing a program to incentivize rental housing. The other is identification of a long-term source of funding for affordable housing that would replace the funding that was eliminated when redevelopment was abolished. I think that was back in 2012. And they've, affordable housing providers have struggled to find an alternate source of funding for that. And then we've added a policy that talks about amending the Montecito Growth Management Ordinance because it's going to be necessary for us to do that to allow the housing projects to move forward to meet our RHNA allocation. So we will be moving forward with something on that. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the housing element before I move on.
Anybody have questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Director Plowman. On the development of the housing funding program. Is it on now? There you go. I can hear you now.
Thank you. I can't see the light because the lights are so bright. Anyway, when applicants have to pay a housing, like a housing mitigation fee, have a certain project size, this housing program that you're talking about through the housing element, that would be a separate mechanism? It wouldn't be like a mitigation fee, or what are you thinking?
So, Commissioner Bradley through the chair, this is we're looking at different sources of funding. This is not housing developers paying a housing fee. This would be something like a vacancy tax or something different, real estate transfer tax, those kinds of things that would provide a long-term source of funding. There's something I think I mean, some agencies do talk about charging housing developers housing fees. We do that as part of our inclusionary housing if they don't build the units, but I think there's something odd about charging a housing developer housing fees. There's the potential where you could charge commercial development housing fees because they do generate a demand, but that's not the type of mechanism the board is interested in looking at, to my knowledge. They're looking at more about something along the lines of an additional tax or something.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have a question, and it's simply about calendaring.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you can't really project when it would get to the planning commission, which of course is what I'm interested in.
Right.
But let's assume first that you do hear back in 30 days with those preliminary comments from HCD. And if we assume that, when do you think it would get to the commission?
So if we were to have only one round of review, which would be the only jurisdiction I think that would only have one round of review. So I kind of doubting it, but if we were,
Right.
it would probably be early fall that it would get to the planning commission.
Okay. Do you think we'll be done this year with planning
Yes,
commission consideration?
I think we will be done with at least the adoption of the housing element. The rezones may spill into next year, but they need to be done by February 2024. So we have to have everything done by then. So we will be doing everything we can to make sure that happens.
Here's why I'm bringing it up. These will be obviously important hearings, and given that you got 400 plus comments, there's bound to be some public comment at the planning commission hearing. And what I think is wise for us all is to have as much notice when those hearings will occur for the benefit of the public, but for the benefit of the commissioners, so we don't have lengthy vacations scheduled at the time that we're going to have this really important hearing, or hearing scheduled when people are going to have lengthy vacations, however you want to look at it, whichever comes first. But I just think it's something we should keep talking about so people try to synchronize our calendars.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think, something this substantial, we may decide we want to do special hearings on it.
Yeah.
Because I think you're going to need the time. And it gives the public an opportunity to express their perspective without putting pressure on other items. And putting pressure on the commission to get something done so you can get to another item. So we'll work with the secretary on that. And as soon as we know more, I'll make sure we keep you apprised of any issues.
And on specially calendared hearings, I know we've had sometimes where we'll calendar a couple of days in a row for certain projects. Are you thinking something like that, or something where here's a hearing this month, here's a hearing another month, so that you can process what you heard the first time? I don't know what works best for P&D.
I think because of the schedule that we're under and the timeframes and the need to move this along, we would probably try and do something. And sometimes I like to do 2 meetings in 1 week, with a day in between.
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we do 1 week, then another week, but it'll really depend on where we are with the, in the year and how quickly we need to move, and that will depend on HCD.
Okay, well, I would urge my fellow commissioners, if you have something in mind that'll get you out of the country for a few weeks or something like that in late summer, fall, that you should get word to Secretary Wilson so he can talk to your travel agent and replan your trip.
Thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate that.
Okay,
We do want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to weigh in.
so are you going to report on the rest of the Board of Supervisors hearing? Like,
I am.
Mr. Chair,
Oh,
before we
yes,
leave that
go ahead.
topic, I don't know if it's worth getting some opinions, but maybe an evening hearing might be an option too, because the housing element workshops were pretty well attended in the evening, and I guess I'd be willing to do an evening hearing if that helps. Just throw that out there. The rest of the commission says, no way, Jose, then
well, my life's so boring. I'm game for anything, but I don't know. Commissioner Freeney actually works and probably be tired by the end of the day. And staff might not really want to attend this, but let's hear. What do you think?
As long as it doesn't go past 8 o'clock, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm certain.
We'll take that into consideration as we're planning. So the other item on the board on the 4th was the Highway 101 Segment D appeal, and the board denied the appeal and approved the permit. They did modify a condition to require some additional landscaping between the 101 and Jameson. And then you should know that the Solomon Hills initiation action that the Planning Commission took, that has been appealed. We don't have a date yet when that will go to the board. We think the parties may be in dialogue right now to see if they can resolve any concerns, but we will keep you posted on that. And then I had one other announcement, and that is that Flood Control is initiating a Montecito watershed study. And they're going to have their first workshop at Montecito Union School on the 23rd of May. Hold on, I just want to make sure I got that date right. It is the 23rd, yeah, 23rd of May, from 5:30 to 7. So if people are interested in that, they can attend that.
Does that have a relation to the appeal in a sense? I mean,
Not that I know of. I don't, you know what? I've asked Public Works to give me a little bit more detail on the purpose of this study because I knew I would get a question about it, but I don't have a lot of detail on it. I assume that there will be some connection because it has to do with analysis of stormwater and flows in Montecito, but I'm not exactly sure the scope of what they're covering. So we can get that to you as soon as we get feedback from the Public Works.
let me explain why I asked. I remember when this matter came in front of us, this appeal,
Mhm.
and in my conclusion, and I stated it publicly, I advised the parties that, analysis of that flood control map and full analysis, it hadn't occurred yet. And then the ultimate review by the board, that they were probably going to have more success in talking to the board after this had been fully studied instead of just proceeding with the appeal. Okay, the appeal's out of the way, but I think anybody who's still interested in this subject should go to that watershed hearing and stay on that and get their input as to just the scope of that map and so forth, and then stay with it with the board.
Yeah. And Caltrans did state that, if in the future, it was possible they discovered that the floodwaters traveled in a way that would facilitate the construction of a sound wall, that they have space for it and it could be done at some future point.
Yeah, that's very good.
And then lastly, just future board items. We have our budget workshop that we're planning and development is presenting, and that is on the 18th of April. And then the COVID extension that you will be hearing, the COVID economic recovery ordinance minimum extension, will be at the board in May, on May 16th. And then the safety element will be there on the 7th of, the 11th of July. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any members of the commission have any additional questions for Director Plowman? Well, I think not. Then shall we go on to our standard agenda?
Thank you.
And Mr. Villalobos, will you read item number 1 into the record?
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of the County of Santa Barbara Planning and Development Department regarding ordinance amendments to the Land Use and Development Code. The proposed ordinance amendments will extend the expiration of temporary allowances to suspend compliance with certain requirements of approved permits, legal non-conforming uses, and a hardship time extension to support economic recovery from the impacts of COVID-19.
All right. And with this kind of thing, we don't need to disclose ex parte contacts, right? No. Mr. Pettit is ably shaking his head, so I will take that as advice that we don't need to. Then could you go ahead, Secretary Wilson?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I'll be doing the presentation today on this ordinance amendment before you today. We were before you in 2021, where we had added some amendments to the ordinances related to economic recovery and set the expiration date to October 31st of this year, or otherwise if it was amended earlier by ordinance amendment. So today we're bringing it back and to extend that time to October 31st of next year of 2024. As we have seen this year, the board in February 28th passed or adopted a resolution to terminate local emergency. The state did as well on the same day on February 28th. So what we're doing now is transitioning out of the provisions related to COVID-19 and safety, although that's still important, but we're more moving into a economic recovery mode. There's ongoing economic recovery efforts that are underway. There's certain provisions in those provisions that allowed certain activities to continue to help businesses either get back post-COVID into normal operating procedures or operating levels. An example is the food service at wineries. So this will allow those provisions to continue for one more year to October 31st of next year. And the focus is, of course, on economic recovery. Just a matter of note, the ordinance amendment that we're looking at today, or that we're proposing today, is only for the Land Use and Development Code. We're not proposing any changes to the Montecito Land Use and Development Code and or the Article 2 of the Coastal Zoning Ordinance. The Montecito Land Use and Development Code, there were some businesses during COVID that took advantage of it, but we don't feel that they have extended that or have those needs as much as in the inland area and the Land Use and Development Code, not to shortchange the Montecito community, but we feel that there's more in the Land Use and Development Code or the inland area. If there was a need for Montecito Land Use and Development Code, we would make those changes as well. Article 2 requires a local coastal plan amendment to make those changes. We had talked to the Coastal Commission and they weren't inclined to give us a waiver, as they've done the last couple of times that we've done that. They waived that requirement for a local coastal plan amendment. So by the time we got through that process, the time had already expired. So right now we're focusing on the inland areas under the Land Use and Development Code. And then there's an example of the change, October 31st, 2024, trying to make this as exciting as possible. A little bit more practice, and I'll get there for you, for the commission. The provisions of CEQA still apply that we found the last couple of times we made this, that it's exempt from environmental review. It's still consistent with the comprehensive plan and zoning, or is it And then we're saying, or we're requesting the commission to make the following actions and to make the findings for approval. Recommend the board adopt an ordinance to amend the ordinance to extend it to October 31st, 2024. And that concludes the presentation, Mr. Chair and Commissioners.
Well, thank you. Do we have any questions from members of the commission of Secretary Wilson? And I do see a light for Commissioner Bridley.
So you emphasize the wineries and food service in the wineries as part of this COVID extension or COVID allowances. Was there a lot of physical structure? Like I'm used to the city of Santa Barbara's parklets, which are, have transformed themselves into a whole State Street master plan, right? But did you have a lot of those things, or was it really just food service within existing structures? I mean, general.
Chair and Commissioner Bradley, we did see some of those other activities occurring throughout the county. More relevant to my experience has been in the Old Town Orchid area. We did see some restaurants and food services expanding into the sidewalk area. So those provisions would continue. That was done in concert with the Public Works Department because there are some permits that they would need in order to move into the sidewalk areas. But we didn't observe as much as the parklets that we saw down State Street, but we did see some businesses expand into the sidewalk areas for food service.
And like shopping centers into shared parking in, strip malls or anything like that, a little bit.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Bradley, I think of maybe a little bit, but I think the main impetus was the food service and wineries that we really received the most of the economic boon or the recovery process occurring. And Deputy Director Travis Ewards is here as well to put him on the spot, but his team was the interface with the requests to have these provisions applied. And so we saw a handful, and like, as I mentioned, early on in 2020, we saw a handful maybe in the Montecito area, but not as much as we came out of COVID. It kind of went back to normal operating procedures. We still see some of those occurring in like the Old Town Orchid area. And not for sure throughout the rest of the county. And maybe Mr. Seawards would know.
Good morning, commissioners. You're accurate. Jeff Wilson's accurate. I mean, there's pieces here and there. I think there's more people using it than actually came in and filled out the paperwork that was required. I mean, Los Olivos, you see things spread out, but I think we had 11 to 15 on record. So yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay, any other questions? Commissioner Farini.
Not sure if this is for Mr. Seward or Mr. Wilson, or maybe you. What's the pathway to permanence for these, say, 15 users that, it's for economic impact or improvement during this emergency time, but then it seems that maybe those businesses will be dependent upon those uses, or that the public has become accustomed to having those available. Is that something we're developing through the ag tourism ordinance? And will you have that done in time, or is there another path?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, to speak to one part of it, one of the ideas behind kicking this out for a year was at the same time we're working on the Ag Enterprise Ordinance. And inside that, it's being proposed to account for the food service at wineries and provide more flexibility. So those industries that are relying on these provisions, the hope or the anticipation is some of those activities are going to get wrapped up into the Ag Enterprise Ordinance and move into that permanency that you're talking about. As far as commercial businesses operating outside of their boundaries, that isn't being contemplated because those are temporary provisions. They're moving into the sidewalk areas and circulations. And so that's a temporary measure. In order to do that, that would take a longer plan, similar to like what they're doing on State Street, where they're closing that street down and coming up with a master plan. We don't have anything in play in regards to commercial areas. Once these provisions end, then they would move back into their offices or establishments to move back into normal operating procedures.
I can address the timing for what I know. And that is, it looks like we're going to get a draft environmental impact report on the combined farm stay ag enterprise ordinance. And meaning a public draft, that would then be commented on. And that's likely to happen maybe the end of this month into May. It's the last I've heard. And then if that occurs, we'll discuss it somewhat, the subject. When we have our workshops on these things in the end of May and early June. That won't replace the formal process that occurs for being able to make a comment on a draft EIR and then have those comments addressed and that whole process. But it'll help. And then it looks like, again, from what I'm told, that the ordinance with the EIR will be heard by the Planning Commission sometime late summer, early fall, with an idea that it could be adopted by the board by the end of the year. And this is something that's been long awaited by the wine industry. I had the privilege of speaking to several members of the wine industry about a concern they had that we might, run out of time on October when this emergency ordinance ended. And that was shared with Director Plowman and various members of the Board of Supervisors, who I'm pleased to see acted immediately on it. And so that we could get this ordinance or this extension now instead of waiting till October so people could count on it. And I was even in Secretary Wilson's office about a month ago, and when he got this assignment, and I thought, well, that's an indication that they're pretty serious about it. They're giving it to him. And he said, and it says, hurry up. And so I know he didn't think he had much exciting to report, but I think it's pretty exciting to report that this came in as an assignment for P&D that's pretty important, really. And it's been processed in less than a month, and here we are. So it was more exciting than you thought, Secretary Wilson, just the fact that you're here. And we very much appreciate it. I know the members of the wine industry appreciate your efforts and the efforts of members of the board to address this and do it right away so they don't have to worry about it come fall. All right. Do we have any public comment on this?
Mr. Chair, no comment for this item.
Okay. And do we have any additional comment or rebuttal or whatever we call it by staff or questions of staff? Then let's go. We'll close the public hearing such as it was and now enter into deliberations. Do any of my commissioners have comments to make in deliberations? It looks like Commissioner Riley, you're all lit up.
Just don't go to sleep. No, I think it's a great solution, and I understand why it is needed, and I would support the recommendation of staff.
Any other comments? I hear none. Well, will somebody like to make a motion on this?
Again. So I would move that the commission makes the required findings for approval of the LUDC ordinance amendment, including CEQA findings, and recommend that the Board of Supervisors make the findings for approval. Also recommend that the Board of Supervisors determine the LUDC ordinance amendment is exempt from CEQA and adopt a resolution recommending that the Board of Supervisors adopt an ordinance case 23 ORD 00001, amending section 35-1 for the LUDC only of chapter 35 zoning of Santa Barbara County Code.
Second.
Mhm. And do we have any further discussion of this motion? No, then let's go ahead with the roll call vote.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Farini,
I,
Chair Park.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Well, thank you. On item number 2, will it take much time to set up? Ready, okay. I'd like to take a break at some point. Would you rather take it now with the idea that, oh, we're going to run this through pretty quick, or would you like to take a break after a few presentations? Let's get going. Okay. Then let's go ahead and read that into the record, and then we'll go to the staff.
All right, thank you. The following is a request of Steve Penza, applicant, to initiate a general plan amendment and rezone to change the comprehensive plan land use designation of APNs 107-150-021 and 107-150-022 from highway commercial to general commercial. Change the zoning designation for those same two parcels from highway commercial to general commercials C3, and to modify the Orchid urban rural boundary, extending it to include APNs 107-150-021 and 107-150-022 within the urban boundary.
Very good. Do we have ex parte disclosures from members of the commission?
yes, Chair Park, I met with Mr. Swank, the applicant's representative on site probably 2-3 weeks ago. Spent some time out there while he explained things and looked at the topography and just the general area.
Very good. Anyone else? Commissioner Bradley?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I had a phone conversation with Mr. Swank, I think last Thursday. No, sorry, it was last Tuesday. Regarding the intent of the GPA request and project in general, but I did not do a site visit until this morning.
This morning? My goodness. And yeah, anyone else? Well, I'll report that I sat down with Mr. Swank for a very thorough, enjoyable briefing on this in his office the Monday before last. Okay, well, let's go to the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Park. So we have Ben Singer is the planner, and he's going to be giving the presentation remotely. And Gwen Baylor is the supervisor on this project.
Mr. Singer.
Good morning, Chair Park, members of the commission. Hope you're all doing well. Today, I am presenting the Penza General Plan Amendment and Rezone applications, which are before your commission for a decision on whether or not to accept the applications for processing. And apologies if you hear a lawnmower in the background, that is outside of my control. Next slide, please. The commission has recently heard about the GPA acceptance process, but I'll go over it again quickly. The planning director reviews applications for GPAs and rezones and either accepts the application or refers it to the planning commission with a recommendation. For this project, the director is referring the request to the planning commission because the project is precedent setting due to the potential conflict with the Orchid Community Plan policies related to Key Site 33 and to the modification of the existing urban rural boundary line. For the reasons stated, the director also recommends that the commission decline to accept the applications for processing. In doing so, the applications will be automatically sent to the Board of Supervisors for review. Next slide, please. The project site is shown here in red. It consists of 2 legal parcels totaling 4.02 acres. It is located in the Orchid community area on the east side of Highway 101 as shown, and it makes up a portion of Key Site 33. The parcels currently have a zoning and land use designation of highway commercial. The site is surrounded by other highway commercial designated properties, as well as the Elks Rodeo site, which is labeled, which is agricultural 2 in designation and zoning. Next slide, please. This slide goes into the conceptual project. The request is to change the land use and zoning designations to general commercial and to modify the urban rural boundary to include the project site in the urban area. The future project will consist of an 11,040 square foot commercial building and 40,000 square feet of uncovered storage areas outdoors for piping materials. The plan here shows the building in yellow and the storage areas in green, along with the abutting roads, Founders Avenue to the north and Morningside Drive to the west. The approximate area of Highway 101 is also labeled, though the actual highway is not shown on the plan. Next slide, please. These next few slides include the considerations raised in the staff memo regarding this project. This isn't necessarily a comprehensive list of all the aspects to consider for the project, but includes the major issues identified with the project. The first of these considerations that the project will have to address is Orcutt Community Plan Policy LU06, which requires that the Orcutt urban-rural boundary is not extended until existing inventories of vacant land within the urban area is nearing build-out. This picture shows the project site in red and the urban-rural boundary as the orange line. Since the Orcutt community is not nearing build-out yet, this policy will need to be amended for the project to be found consistent with the Orcutt Community Plan, which is part of the comprehensive plan of the county. Next slide, please. The next consideration is the potential for spot zoning. The project site is shown again here in the red hash, and the red line that goes around the neighboring properties is the boundary for the highway commercial zone and land use designation. It's the same line. If the GPA and rezone are approved only for this project site, as is currently the proposal, these two parcels would have a different zoning designation, land use designation, and urban rural status than the surrounding properties. Next slide, please. The third issue is the intent and the policies of Key Site 33. The Key Site describes the intent of the highway commercial zoning as supporting commercial uses associated with the Elks Rodeo facilities, such as motels, convenience stores, gas stations, and restaurants. The parcels are also explicitly described in the Key Site 33 policy as highway commercial. The intent and policy of Key Site 33 would also need to be amended for the proposed project to be consistent with the Orcutt Community Plan. Next slide, please. The final item for consideration is the required findings for a GPA and a rezone. The proposal must be found to be in the interests of the general community welfare, consistent with the county comprehensive plan, state planning laws and zoning laws, and the LUDC, consistent with good zoning and planning practice, and in the public interest. If any of these findings cannot be made, the GPA and rezone cannot be approved. Next slide, please. If the applications are accepted, that does not commit the county to approve the project. It'll just allow the applicant to move forward with analysis, research, additional applications and plans for the project, and allow the county to put these through the normal processing and review. The project will also be subject to review by other county departments. It'll be subject to environmental review, design review, and review by the county decision makers when brought for approval of the actual project. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, the director recommends that the Planning Commission decline to accept the GPA and rezone applications for processing, and by doing so, refer the applications to the board along with a recommendation to the board. Alternatively, the commission can accept the applications for processing. That completes my presentation, and as always, I'm available for any questions that the commission has. Thank you.
Do we have any questions of Mr. Singer? Mr. Farini?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Singer. Nice presentation. Wish you were here. We did not hear the lawnmower, so job well done. Hey, if you could go back to slide 6, initial consideration, and I'd like to discuss the spot zoning with you here. In this picture on the right, say the right half of that area, that's where the school is, correct?
Commissioner Farini through the chair, that's correct. That big parcel that on the right makes up about almost half of this total area is the Santa Maria High School.
Right. Okay. So then when they built that did not go through the planning process because schools are exempt?
That is correct.
So, but the use was really changed. So at this point, the CH is almost obsolete on this parcel because you have a school there. You've all, in other words, you've already introduced an urban use onto this area, inconsistent with the say the CH zoning that exists today.
Commissioner Freeney, through the chair, that's a fair assessment, especially for that parcel. Just on the spot zoning, the two other parcels, the one north of the project site that's vacant, and then the one east that in this picture you can see some row crops on, those still maintain the CH zoning and rural status, though you're correct that this school does essentially introduce a urban use to this area.
Yeah, it was just kind of an observation. It's interesting how, we lose control of our ability to really plan out an area. And so now it just seems that we do need to consider the evolution, if you will, of this area. So thank you, Mr. Singer.
Anyone else in the commission?
Commissioner, oop,
Oh,
Chair
go
Park,
ahead.
could I
If you-
just
if you
add one
would.
thing? I think one just nuance, Commissioner Freeney, is in the CH zone currently, and I'm looking at the code, it does look like schools are allowed with a CUP. So it is a permitted use, even though it's a CUP, whereas the proposed use before you today is not permitted. So that's why they're having to change the zone. So I think there's a little nuance there.
Yes, understood. I was really looking at this as how the evolution that it is now an urban use, right? Where it was zoned Ag 2, I believe, or is the land use and the zoning where the school is built now? What is its land use and zoning?
Mr. Singer, do you know that? Is it CH for the zoning?
Yes, the land use designation and zoning for that parcel are both still highway commercial.
Okay, well, that just brings another little fingerlet of confusion then. So if in the Orca community plan, it's not part of the urban boundary, it's not within the urban boundary, it's in the rural boundary, right? We're looking for that change. How do you balance that out? I mean, CH then is not really a rural use, it's more of an urban support.
It's a bit
use.
confounding, isn't it? I think in the research when this project came to us, I think Mr. Singer found that the intent of the Keyside 33 specifically carved out this commercial highway, these parcels, and it specifically said to support the Elks Rodeo with things like hotels and services. And so it seems like at the time this plan was made, they just wanted to support the Elks by allowing commercial uses just here outside of the rural boundary. So even though these would be considered urban because the zone allows them, we would permit them because they're permitted by the zoning.
Very good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Any other questions of staff? I have one and I'm glad you brought this up, Mr. Freeney, because I was thinking the same thing, not so much the zoning, but here we have one of the pictures looks like ag land and it's not within the urban boundary. On the other hand, we've got a big high school that's about to open up, that's taken up most of that. And then the parcel just to the east of the subject parcels, I understand, is owned by Foursquare Church. Is that right? And for at least the last decade, different churches have owned that parcel and thought about developing it as a church. So I think the time is long past that this is ag land. So by moving the urban boundary, it's not as though we're destroying agriculture. It's kind of, that ship has sailed. But getting back to to the zoning. I'm not terribly familiar with, is it commercial highway, CH, is that what it is? But it did come up in discussion a few weeks ago on the Solomon Hills project, and I've heard about it and other things. And kind of what I hear is that it's an antiquated designation that's not much appreciated. And most professionals think it ought to be retired. And can you comment on that, Mr. Singer or Mr. Sewards or Mr. Wilson or whoever is brave enough to?
I think I've heard that same assessment.
Yeah.
That maybe it's a little antiquated. I mean, I was not here when the Orchid plan was made. I've heard.
I don't think
infor-
Mr. Singer been born
I
yet.
probably not, probably not. I've heard that there was a distinction made that there wanted to be a clear, the Highway 101 was a buffer. And we did not want sprawl type development to be happening on the east side of the 101.
Right.
I've been given that background. I think the Key Site 33 intent seems to have been specifically carved out for the Elks Rodeo at the time. And that there was a desire to just not have commercial sprawling development that just starts to take over the land use pattern on that side of the 101 and then just keep encroaching into ag. I mean, that's the information I've heard since I've been here. I
But
don't know if that was helpful or not.
Well,
but-
it is, but would it be a fair statement that many of those in the planning apparatus taken as a whole think that our commercial zones, C2 and so forth, are more modern in their drafting and more flexible for planning purposes. Is that a fair statement?
I
Chair
think
Park.
there's a, oop, go ahead, Zen.
Sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
would say that again, certainly a sentiment that I've heard, and the CH zone is pretty restrictive in things that it allows. It has fewer allowances and often with a conditional use permit required for them instead of a land use permit. And even the described intent of it is kind of to serve the highway traveler, which is a sort of thing that we have moved away from as a thing that we're really stressing to do. It's not a very common zone in this county. There are a few pockets of it that remain, but certainly it's maybe not the zone that it once was.
Very good. Well, that's well stated, Mr. Singer. Well, if we have no further questions, oh, yes, go ahead, Commissioner Briley.
I really enjoyed this project because it gave me a reason to dig down in the Orchid Community Plan and go cross-eyed on some of the screens on the land use maps in there. I'm going to way to it. So without getting into deliberation, how many other CH zone districts are in the Orchid Community Plan? Because I could only find this one. Does everybody know?
Commissioner Bradley, through the chair, I believe this is the only area of CH zoning in the Oregon Community Plan. Again, there are a few pockets here and there throughout the county, often along a highway, but I'm not aware of any other land in the Orchid area that's zoned CH other than this area of Key Site 33.
Chair Park and Commissioner Briley, just looking at the area, it's outside of the Orchid Community Plan, but a similar designation is located off of the Betaravia and Highway 101 off ramp. And you can see that's where the intent was of a highway commercial. You have gas stations, there's a restaurant there. So that's developed to serve the highway traveler. So that's the intent of that highway commercial. So that's a local example of where highway commercial is in the area.
Okay. I dying to get into deliberations, but just a couple other questions. In my enjoyment of the Orchid Community Plan, I found a couple other policies that might have a place in this, and one of them was about the extension of sewer service over across the highway, because it's not part now of the, what is the district? Laguna County Sanitation District. So I thought there was a policy, I can't read my writing. Very good, very good. Policy 02.7. WW 02.7 that discouraged development on this side of the highway without having that extension. But I guess that is all just part of the general plan process, right? If the applicant proceeds, and that would be their burden to extend the line.
Yes, they would have
And-
to demonstrate adequate services, water, sewer, all of that stuff.
Okay, and
Yep,
so once,
again, like it's weird because we're at the initiation, so we've got like this basic conceptual, but we have not dug into policy consistency or development standards.
Sure.
Consistency.
so part of the challenge of this initiation is, forecasting if services for an urban use like this pipe supply company go across the highway, then the rest of that side of the highway would definitely get developed, and there's a concern, but that's for deliberation. So I think that was the only question, the zoning.
Commissioner Bradley, through the chair, something that I believe the applicant's agent will touch on is that very thing. I'll let him speak to it a little bit more, but I believe some of those services have been extended on the other side of the highway already to serve the school, and that they are confident that they could tie into those existing extensions.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, well then let's move on to the applicant's presentation. Oh, Commissioner Cooney, do you have any comments or questions for staff before we go on to the applicant's presentation?
Mr. Chair, thank you for recognizing the possibility, but I'm just listening carefully as this is other than spot zoning, which I've worked on before. This is all new, so I'm anxious to hear staff and the rest of the commission decide what the best course is.
Mr. Swank, it's good to see you. We have all day, but we don't want to take all day, do we? And I'm thinking that if you have the normal 15 minutes, because you're good at organizing and getting to the point, then that'll be adequate for you. And then another 5 minutes for rebuttal of whatever occurs afterwards. Will that work for you?
Chairman Park, that's fine. I may cheat a minute or two on that, but I think we're going to be at the 15.
Okay,
minutes,
it
so.
just gives us a general idea.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Well, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Good morning, members of the commission. David Swank with Urban Planning Concepts. I'm here representing Steve Pensa, who is in the audience here, is the owner of FAMCon Pipe and Supply. As Mr. Singer had mentioned, this site, and what we're asking for here is an allowance to initiate a general plan amendment and a rezone. Nobody's asking for a project to be approved today, and we would have a companion development plan. We would work with staff to be able to make sure we answer all the issues and meet all the policies. As Mr. Singer had mentioned, I'm trying to remember where oops, what did I just do? I hit the wrong button. Oh, there it is, laser. I usually have my own laser, but for some reason I forgot it today. Mr. Singer mentioned, this is part of Key Site 33, as you can see in the yellow. This is the project in question right here. That's located in the Arca Community Plan. And just to touch on quickly the location, this is the site where we're located. We're located at the Santa Maria Way interchange of Highway 101. To the south of us is the Oaks Rodeo. This is the Santa Maria Joint Union High School Districts. This is their vocational technical school. It's located here. The Foursquare Church parcel is located here, and the Icola parcel is located here. This is the area that's owned highway commercial that we're talking about. So I wanted to give you a little brief history on this site of what's occurred in here. Previously to the Arca Community Plan, this site was a Christmas tree farm in the 1980s. And then during the 1990s, during the Arca Community Plan process, it was rezoned from the 661 ordinance to highway commercial as part of the Arca Community Plan. Nothing really occurred since then. Approximately about 2005, the Hope Community Church, Phil and Sherry May, pastors, had purchased this property, and what they wanted to develop was a development plan. This is the development plan that occurs here, to put in approximately a 30,000 square foot church facility, and also to subdivide it into 3 parcels: parcel 1, parcel 2, and parcel 3. The Planning Commission approved this. I believe Commissioner Cooney was part of the Planning Commission at that time. I can't remember that far back, but they did approve it in 2007, and we recorded the map. They created the 3 parcels when that had occurred. The hope was at that time is that Hope Community Church is that they wanted to, in order to finance the building of the church, to sell these 2 front parcels. And that would have been able to do that. But they did put those up for sale. A big question, actually, this answers Commissioner Briley's question. As part of the Hope Community Church, we negotiated with Laguna County and the Planning Commission and staff, and approved a Laguna County Sanitation District pipeline, and we actually annexed this into Laguna County Senate District area for a sewer to go underneath Highway 101. And at that time, across the street, Michael Toves was doing a subdivision that time, and as a service to the church, he put a stub into their sewer line. So that was already approved. We actually, after the project was approved, we had all the encroachment permits from Caltrans, but unfortunately couldn't build it. The other thing about this site is that we discovered, as part of that Christmas tree, that they had service with that time at Cal Cities. So that was part of the groundwater basin baseline as part of the development of the Orchid Community Plan and the adjudication of the basin. So these 3 parcels actually have grandfathered water rights through Golden State. We actually had the final canon will. So it's a unique situation for this site. Already has all of the necessary public utilities. We have water, we have sewer, and then we have a road. And now, in terms of the actual project, what I want to do is just take a minute really quick, introduce Steve Pensa, so he can, he wants to come to our neighborhood here, and he wants to just give an introduction of his company so you know what they're doing. So Steve, let's step up.
Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, commissioners and staff. My name is Steve Penza, the owner of FamCon Pipe. Our company was founded in 1904. My wife and I purchased it in 1985. Our first year in business, we had paltry $317,000 in sales. With the opening of our branch in Santa Maria 5 years ago, our annual sales are over 55 million per year for both branches. We employ 8 employees in Santa Maria who are all local from this area. If our project gets approved and built, we expect that number to more than double within 5 years. We believe in the community and we support it in many ways. Charitably, we hire all local employees. We buy all our equipment through local vendors. We currently lease a building on Carlotti Drive from Vince Lopez Jr. We have been looking for a new facility for over 2 years. We feel that we have found our new home on Founders Avenue. We hope you feel the same way and will vote in favor of moving our project forward. Thank you for your consideration.
And in terms of the project that we're looking at doing, it's approximately an 11,000 square foot building with a 40,000 square foot of outdoor storage. It's open Monday through Friday. It's generally not open to the public. What his clientele is, he provides a very vital service to local builders, our agricultural community, and also our own public works departments, City of Santa Maria Public Works, and Caltrans, providing the necessary pipes from copper and culverts and all the different necessary things that they need. As I mentioned earlier, the benefits of the project is that we already do have those existing public services. This is actually a unique situation in the Orchid Community Plan, especially on the other side of Highway 101, because typically they have to buy water from the City of Santa Maria. They have to annex into Laguna County. That's already been done, and they don't need to buy any water from Santa Maria. So what we do is we have a very unique urban situation over there. The tax base of his company is over $65 million in sales. So, and this is, high-end products that they're providing, and that would increase being able to provide this additional expansion of his company. But what's most important about it is that multiplier effect, because they provide these very vital, necessary services for our builders, our agricultural committees, community, for our public works, providing all the necessary materials. They need to be able to do their job. So there's a lot of businesses depend upon his supplies to be able to expand their own businesses. And again, as I mentioned, what we're asking for is just to allow us to be able to initiate and start this process and have it judged on its own merit. It's hard to see, but this is a conceptual site plan. We don't have a development plan yet, but in terms of the area, I'm going to show a rendering of what it looks like a little bit better. But here's the structure. What we do is the Founders is already built through the school, and then we would come through, and then the storage areas, and everything would be heavily screened landscaping wise. And we would work with Public Works on any improvements we need to do on Founders and also on the frontage road. This is a very rough rendering of what we would conceive. Located on the side, as you can see, this is the Foursquare Church property. You can see the school located back here. This would be his building, the storage areas. There's a little in-holding parcel that's located in here that's actually a dog grooming facility, the Polished Pet, that's located here in existing building. So we're actually going around and do the configuration of these two parcels. And this is again, another rough rendering. What we're going to do is that we have Ravad Albrecht Architects as our architect, and we're going to be building this building to look like a barn motif on there. So it has a very rural in context. Again, heavily screened in terms of trees, wrought iron fencing, decorative wrought iron fencing going along it. So it actually is going to be, we're going to work closely with the NBAR, and we have done some reach outs with members of the NBAR of what they think and for them to provide their input. Now, what I wanted to conclude with, we're talking about this, the rezone we would like to do. The reason Mr. Penza wants to have C3 is because C3 is the only zoning designation you're allowed outdoor storage. So the site right now currently is zoned highway commercial. This is, and Chairman Park was correct, an antiquated zoning designation that's disappearing through the county through people actually initiating, and also the county has done rezones in the past to rezone out of highway commercial to more modern and such as C2 as well on here. And as you can see highlighted in yellow, there's very little uses you can do in the CH area. So it's so one of the problems that the maids have had, they put this thing up in market on 2012. They were able to sell the back parcel to Foursquare Church, where they wanted to build theirs in 2014. But the two front parcels they have had up for sale since 2012. And we have helped them a lot with that. A lot of people have looked at it, but they saw what the use is. It wasn't one that they were interested in, and they decided to go elsewhere. Foursquare also, because of their plans have changed, has their parcel up for sale too, but can't find anybody willing to buy theirs too because of the restricted zoning. If we're considering to have a site that actually could be developed in the future, rezoning it to C3, as you can see, there's a lot more, especially in the retail, a lot more uses that you can have available for them to potentially have a buyer for the property. I would also mention all the uses that are in the CH are also allowable uses in the C3. So we're not taking away from the intent of the CH designation in the Orchid Community Plan. Those people can still come. We still would have gas stations, motels that could potentially want to go into that zone district. But this allows a lot more flexibility in terms of that. I would also mention, if you also look at the C2 also has basically the same uses as the C3. The big difference between C2 and C3 is that with C3, you can do farm supply companies that need that kind of outdoor storage. A farm supply company, anything to support our local agricultural, is not allowed in the C2, but it is allowed in the C3. And in an agricultural community, that's something that's very important to our farmers, that there could be potential businesses that could come and support theirs. This is really the only area. And you're right, it's the only CH parcels that exist in the North County as well. Now, the issue in terms of the rural boundary. When the Orchid Community Plan was founded, keep hitting wrong buttons here. This is the delineation of the highway commercial. This is our property in question. This is the school, the Icolas, and also the Foursquare Church properties. I'm not sure. I've been around forever, but this is even before my time. The Orchid Community Plan was passed before my kids were even born, and they're long gone from the home. But for some reason, there was either a decision or it was an overlook. They did not adjust the rural boundary to accompany the CH. This is Ag 2 zone all around here. And typically what you see, and I think is an inconsistency, is to have an urban zone, highway commercial in the middle of a rural zone. So, you know, even though it's a highway commercial, technically any commercial development is not considered rural. So there's an inconsistency here. The cleanup on this would actually to extend the rural boundary to fit within the urban. So you have urban services, you have urban land, and then you have your rural land. That's the logical way that you would normally do, you know, a community plan or any kind of, you know, agricultural urban boundaries. So what our proposal is to do is to look at not spot zoning this site. We have met with the adjacent landowners, and you have in your packet, you do have letters from both the Polished Pet owners here and the Foursquare that they would support a rezone into C3, and they would be part of it and they prove it. You'll hear in public testimony in terms of the ICOLAs that also they don't object to this being to the C3. Talking to the school district, they said, we don't care what the zoning because we're going to do what we want anyhow. So we have from all of the people that live here, they have support. I mean, 30 years ago was a whole nother world, you know, and that's how old this plan is. And everything has changed a lot. Preferences of customers, of what businesses come here. If this was what the highway commercial called for, very desirable, they would be already looking at the sites, especially with public services already involved in it. Now, the last thing I wanted to touch on was in terms of the land use policy, ORCID 6, and staff. You know, when we first looked at this, we did talk about the possibility of a staff initiation. So because I think everybody's in general agreement that highway commercial is antiquated and not really relevant to today. So, but the rural boundary, that's what brings us here today because of the rural boundary. Because the policy says it shall separate principally urban land uses and those which are rural and agricultural in nature. Well, we're highway commercial zone. So that is an urban use, not a rural use. And if we're going to truly honor that will separate urban land uses, we should be moving the boundary where the commercial zoning and the rural boundary exist. And we finally have an applicant that's here that's willing to do it on his own dime. So and as Chairman Park had mentioned, there's a school already located there. The urban uses are already there. When the church came up, they had easement rights to these. They built that sewer line. It's already existing. The water line's already existing. All the utilities already exist on this site. The way I look at it, you know, if it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. And that's what this is. This is an urban lands. So, and with all the service required. So we would like to adjust the boundary accordingly. The boundary shall represent the maximum extent of the ORCID urban area and the urban-rural boundary and shall not be extended until existing inventories of vacant land. Now, besides Key Site 22, I know ORCID is largely built out. There's a few little pockets that are there, but that's not relevant to this to this site because we have a site that is urban already. So we're just asking to basically correct what should have been done back when the ORCID community plan and designates this in the correct place. In terms of being precedent setting, as staff has said, the way I look at it in terms of being precedent setting, you know, we have a site that is already in a community plan. It's already got urban services. That's already been built. It's zoned commercial. I would ask where in the county we would find a similar circumstance that we would have all three of those elements in play. So being precedent setting, it can't really happen anywhere else in the county because you're going to have to do ag land and be at zone. So I would say it's not precedent setting. And then lastly, the boundary adjustments show approved only as a part of a major community plan update. Well, state planning laws allow for flexibility, and the commission has the authority to look at the benefits that would bring and to make this a more logical urban boundary and a rezone away from the highway commercial. You have the authority to allow us to be able to initiate that. Again, we're not asking for a project to be approved. We're asking you for us to allow us to work with staff to development, and we are confident we are going to be able to make all the findings. And also, and lastly, the project adjusts the boundaries where it really should have been. So we do have commercial and ag two. You have a true hard urban rural boundary finally. And then these are the sites I just wanted to show. Again, here's the Icola property, Foursquare, and the school. This is Polish Pet. We have all of the people that live here that could possibly rezone these sites. They're all in agreement. The sites currently with their configuration and their acreage would be very difficult to build just highway commercial. They're either too large, except unless you're putting a large motel in here, and you would have to subdivide these properties. And there's a lot of things that have to be involved. And that's one of the reasons you don't see these going forward. We get a lot more flexibility in terms of being able to build this out if we can do that. And then lastly, just the photos of the site. This is looking south. That's the Elks Rodeo. I mean, it's basically a sand hill here. This is looking west. You could see this is where the Polish Pet facility is. Looking north, the Icola properties here, and then you could see looking east, here is the school. And then again, Founders Avenue is already built, sewer lines already installed, and here's the frontage road alongside. So we don't have to build any new more roads. All of the infrastructure already exists for this kind of use. And then what our request is for the Planning Commission to approve our request that we would allow initiate the processing of these applications and also an accompanying development plan. We work with staff to make sure that we can make all the findings and then just allow us the opportunity to show that we can have this project reviewed and approved on its own merits. And then it'd be environmentally reviewed and bring back to the Planning Commission by staff in the future for your deliberations. And that would conclude my presentation, and we're available for any questions.
My fellow commissioners have questions of Mr. Swank.
I do
Mr.
have-
Ridley.
Mr. Swank, you said that Mr. Tobes had a housing project across from which the Foursquare property or where?
Where it was
can you
located,
explain that?
I'll go to the aerial and I can show you.
You had on slide
Oops.
13.
Right there. So what happened was, this is where where Hope Community Church was going to build.
Mhm.
There was a plan to put it, this was under construction at that time, this subdivision. And what we did is this takes a sewer line to go underneath Highway 1 and connect. I don't exactly remember where the stub was, but he installed the sub while he was constructing that subdivision.
Oh, so you're talking about the subdivision on the west side of 101.
Commissioner Park, Commissioner Riley, yes, that's true.
Okay,
Mhm.
I thought you meant it was on your
No,
side. Okay.
everything was extended down in here. We look just for talking utilities. We found existing water meters down located in here. That's the reason why we had gone through with county council and everything back then to show that we are grandfathered in so they could access Golden State water.
Okay.
And I would also mention that we had enough, because this is a 30,000 square foot facility, church facility. They were anticipating 500 to 750 attendees at that time. I mean, don't have that much with this project. It's more like about 10 a day, but all of the utilities were designed according to that as part of that environmental review, and it was all approved.
I have one other question. So the Penza, Mr. Penza and his company, where do they conduct this kind of business now? Where are their storage facilities and how are those accessed?
Chairman Park, Commissioner Bradley, they have two locations. They have one in Santa Maria already. They can't expand that any farther, and that's the reason they're coming here. And the other one is in Oxnard.
Oh, okay. So this would be in addition to those two locations, not replacing one?
Oh, okay.
Hi, Chair and Commissioner, we need to get that on the mic. So Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. We're at Carlotti Drive right now on a 1 acre parcel, including a building. And we've totally outgrown it to where our pipe is now in our parking lot. And that's why we've been looking for the last 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Farini.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go to slide 11. Okay. You were talking about farm animals, so you're confusing me. Is this CH or is this ag? You talked about ducks and all this quacking. Just
No.
So let's try to figure this out here. And let's use the yellow line, right? That is the boundary right now of the CH zone. Correct or not?
Chairman Park Commissioner Freeney, that's correct. This outlines the same as here. So these
Yeah.
shows you the parcels that are inside the rural boundary and commercial highway.
Okay, so then the bottom quarter of that, right? That's what we're talking about. Now, the Icola lot is on the top, right?
Mhm.
And they would want to be a part of the process eventually.
Chairman Park Commissioner Farini, that's my understanding. Mr. Jerry Schmidt's going to be speaking in part of his comments on the Icola piece.
Okay, so I guess I don't quite understand the mechanics of how you get all of that to go one direction. So to try to avoid the spot zoning, if we just say we're going to zone 2 parcels, right, then we are spot zoning.
Chairman Park Commissioner Farini, if we just did our site here, we understood that, yeah, that's what I would consider spot zoning. That's why we've gone to all the adjacent landowners to say they'd be willing to come. They'd be part of our process in terms of doing the rezone. So we would work out with staff. I don't know if they would be required to sign the application or whatever we would have to do, but we would work that out with staff. But our application that we would be submitting would be including all parcels to just do away with the highway commercial.
Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Freeney, if the proposal was to do a general plan amendment rezone for all the parcels, then that would be one application. And all the property owners would sign on to that general plan amendment rezone to propose all of the properties to come in. And then the project specific would just be Mr. Swink's client. So the answer would be yes, they could come in as one.
Okay, thank you. Then if we go to you're referring it to the 4 square parcel, right?
Correct that one here.
Right. My eyes aren't that good in the print, pretty tough to read here. Is a church approved under CH?
Chair Park Commissioner Farini, yes, it is. It's actually because it's a church, it's actually allowable as a conditional use permit on all zoning designations.
Okay, and then I think you referenced in 2014.
Correct. In
That
2014,
was approved.
Foursquare purchased the property from Hope Community Church because they had given up. They had to sell the property off. The Hope Church folks kept this port, but they sold that. And then there was a change, I believe, in pastorship. Pastor Wheeler retired, and there was a lot of requirements in terms of the 4 square requirement. They had to wait, and eventually they changed their plans. And then I believe it was in 2020, I believe they put that up for sale, and it's been on for sale since.
Okay, but at some point they were issued a permit, or what happened there?
Chairman Park Commissioner Farini's, we had done extensions on the Hope Community Church development plan. And as long as they fit it within the footprint of that, they could proceed, but eventually they allowed those permits to expire. So that's another big part of it, is they'd have to start back from square one, and they just couldn't afford it. So they put it up for sale.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Cooney, did you have any questions of Mr. Swink?
I do have one question.
Why don't you go
Mr.
ahead?
Chair. Yes, Mr. Swink, I, like you, don't remember seeing this project that side of the highway in 2007, but here we are, 2023, and I'd like to know from your standpoint, what difference essentially does it make if we follow the director's recommendation and decline to accept your application at this point, but refer it to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation from the Planning Commission? That's one course. Or alternatively, accept the general plan amendment and rezone, which is what I understand you're seeking us to do today.
Chairman Park Commissioner Cooney, that's correct. We hope, and I know that the Planning Commission has the authority to allow us to go ahead and initiate this process. That is the other option that staff had given, is to just to refer this to the board and have them make the decision to allow it. So it is, again, we're asking for, so we can get started, that we would have the commission just go ahead, and staff indicated to us, that that's satisfactory for us to start. We had started on this project with a staff initiation, but then when it was discovered about the rural boundary, that's when they decided it's best to go to the planning commission. But it's entirely within your authority and discretion just to allow us to initiate now.
Thank you.
Mr. Swank, I have a couple of questions. You know they're coming. First one, and I'm throwing you a softball here.
Mhm.
But tell us, how does this business support agriculture?
Chairman Park, as it's a pipe and supply company, and what they do is, as you know, and Commissioner Freeney can attest to this, they do provide all that necessary infrastructure for irrigation tubing, for all the different things that agriculture needs, culverts, all the piping, which probably Commissioner Freeney can attest how hard it is to get some of that sometimes, especially in these days. They're a vital industry. We don't have many around here that they can do that with. That's why one of the reasons he wants to expand is because he does that. So, I mean, he does everybody, but, agriculture is our big thing here. And he likes this site because it is closer to those clients that they could provide all the materials that they would need to do that. That's why it's a pipe and supply company. They provide all of that, copper tubing, anything else that they would need. So it's a very important part of agriculture to be able to provide, those water crossings and irrigation systems and everything, for the materials that they need.
I think it's very interesting that you brought up the difference in C3, the outdoor storage. And I was trying to think of other areas that have that. And I'm not real clear near Santa Maria, but I can think of going north, Napomo, going south, Buellton and Camarillo. So Buellton, my neck of the woods. On the east side, we have a pipe and supply company with outdoor storage.
Mhm.
We have irrigation supplies companies with outdoor storage. We have places where you can buy tractors and trucks with outdoor storage. I mean, it seems, maybe you can comment on this, Commissioner Freeney, that to support agriculture, we have to have these kind of commercial businesses that are going to have outdoor storage.
I can comment on that a little bit.
You would.
The big challenge we face is inventory, is having it accessible at all times. I don't know how many farmers there are, we're just a small part of his business, I'm sure. But if there's 100 growers out there and they need to replace a pipeline or change a field, they need access to that. And if we have to wait for it to get trucked in, maybe that project won't happen this year, right? Because we tend to get into these situations. Hey, we have some plants available. We need to put in a new high pressure system. Go pick up the pipe, right? And sometimes we're caught short, and we may put that project off for a year. So supply is very important. I thought it was interesting, Mr. Penza saying that he's out of room. And he's having to keep things in the parking lot. It sounds like our restaurant guys a little bit, right? They've yeah, right.
And you like freeway access, so these heavy trucks bringing things back and forth don't have to negotiate urban streets and so forth. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, now here's the one you knew I was going to ask about. And is because I always ask about housing for these different commercial projects, whether they're cannabis, agriculture, or whatever comes in front of us, because we're looking for housing. And here with that outdoor storage, this isn't really a good site for housing right on site, or what do you think? Did you talk about that with Mr. Penza?
Chairman Park, the challenge I would say on this site is, first off, being on the other side of the 101 with the tech school there, with this use, you got the Elks Rodeo to the south. It is something they can do in zoning designations, as we said. And I can't speak for Foursquare Church. I know they want to sell the property, but that would probably be something to be weighed on their own merits. But there is available land here. It doesn't matter whether it's C3, but having the school there, that's a tech school. So it's interesting, the kind of students that go there, they're the ones that come in, they're trying to do the trades. One thing that Mr. Pensa wanted to do is that he's reaching out to the school. He wants to provide an internship program for students out there to get certified in like forklift operations, stuff like that. So he wants to be part of that. But you're a ways from the community services, so it's not like they can walk to a grocery store, which is what we like everybody to do. But I know I'm in support of providing housing wherever. I think this site, even if this didn't exist, would be a challenge in there just because it's separated from the community. So you want to have housing as part of the community.
But you're looking to have 8 to 10 more employees and families, and with the multiplier effect, which has been long recognized by geographers and economists, there'll be even more people, jobs created in this community is by virtue of this. Is that correct?
Chairman Park, yes, it is. I mean, one of the things that as we have to face the reality that the city of Santa Maria is growing and people are still coming here. It's quickly become the affordable area in the entire Central Coast. And so but we also need to provide all the necessary infrastructures for them too as well. So yeah, he's doing like 8 to 10 employees. These aren't going to be minimum wage jobs that he does.
No.
You know, he does,
They'll be moderate
workfor-
income jobs.
Yeah,
right?
he'll do a workforce housing income on there. And I see them being able to move into the Orchid area and other places like that. But you know, I thought about it after you and I discussed this about this site and if it would be available. And I know if I was looking for housing like that, I'm really separate from the community. And it's some people like that, but wedged in between the school and the highway on there, I don't know appropriate here, but there's lots of opportunities elsewhere to be able to do that as well.
That's
So,
right. Well, and I'll address my thoughts on this
Mhm.
in the deliberations. Anybody else have any questions to Mr. Swank or Mr. Penza? And thank you for coming today, Mr. Penza. No one else? Then I think we should take a break right now. I know Mr. Schmidt's ready to get up and say something, but if you can just hold off a few minutes. That's just right where I am too. So then let's take a 10-minute break and reconvene. And so let's come. Okay, we've reconvened and now we're going to turn to public comment. And I have one speaker's slip. It's Mr. Schmidt, Jerry Schmidt.
Good morning. Probably appropriate that I'm here when the subject is antiquated things. My name is Jerry Schmidt. I'm one of the owners of Pacifica Commercial Realty and Schmidt Family Investments in Santa Maria. My company's have been in business here for nearly 35 years. I've been an Orchid resident for over 25 years and spent most of my life on the Central Coast. Pacifica Commercial Realty represents Steve Penza and FamCon Pipe on the rezone you're considering. And with that, I'd like to give you some thoughts on why I think the C3 zoning designation is the appropriate zoning for the properties east of Highway 101 and specifically for FamCon's use. The most important factor of the C3 zoning is the outdoor storage component. A C3 zoning designation would provide for companies like FamCon and many others who display some of their products outdoors. Other jurisdictions have similar zonings that allow sales of inventory displayed outside. You've seen companies in Camarillo and Paso Robles and Oxnard. Other retail zoning designations such as C2 do not allow for the storage or display of products outside as part of the approved uses, and usually only allow those with a conditional use permit. City of Santa Maria historically has had a CM zone, and now they're requiring a conditional use permit for outdoor storage over just a small portion. We've received considerable support from the surrounding property owners and users. Given the proximity to Santa Maria High School's new industrial arts and technology campus, FamCon will prove to be a beneficial neighbor. Many of FamCon's employees earn a very high level of wages compared to Santa Maria's demographics. And Steve Penza acknowledges a mutually beneficial relationship that could result from students looking for career opportunities here at home, working with underground installations and related products sold by FamCon. Furthermore, we've received support from the Ventriglia family, the owners of the animal kennel next to the subject property. We've received similar support from the kennel operators themselves. And as mentioned, the Foursquare Church has also expressed support for the FamCon project and the rezone of the property, as you can see from their letters. My company's managed a portion of the Icola family's portfolio for several years, and the Icola family owns property adjacent to the proposed FamCon project on Founders Avenue. After several conversations with Carolyn Icola, she has no objection to the rezone of the properties in that area to C3, as development would also benefit her family's assets. The highway commercial zoning is restrictive, and in my experience, it does not attract the businesses we typically see in the Santa Maria Valley. The zoning is one reason why properties in that area have not been considered by potential developers over the years. FamCon's products are in high demand in our rural community, and the result of companies like FamCon is a significant multiplier. You've heard about that, affecting agricultural, building, public works, and other sectors. Fortunately, FamCon is willing to do the work necessary to rezone the property to C3, which will greatly benefit our community and the surrounding property owners. C2, which is another retail zoning, is more of an appropriate zoning for areas with immediate and regular flow of traffic, both pedestrian and vehicular. Demographic rings measure the number of neighbors, population base, income, and other factors used by retailers when considering locations. Retailers generally look for sites supported by high traffic counts and streets that allow higher traffic flows. Developers greatly prefer C2 sites with traffic patterns that serve people going to work and coming home from work. And traffic flow is the main consideration, or the main variable, for companies considering C2 zone properties. So that's why we don't think C2 is necessarily a correct one for this site. There's obviously no residential area out in there on Founders Avenue. And there's also no regular traffic flows or patterns out on that side, very low traffic count. The C3 zoning, as David pointed out, generally offers the same allowable uses as C2, but also adds the outdoor storage, which is beneficial to agricultural and the building industry. Orchid has no other undeveloped areas where C2 zoning or C3 zoning, could be more appropriate. And we respectfully request approval to move forward with the zone change of the current adequate zoning to C3. And thank you very much for your time. Any questions? Have a good day.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Okay, do we have any Zoom callers, Mr. Villalobos, for public comment?
No Zoom testimony for this item.
Okay. Then now we would typically have any rebuttal Do you have any rebuttal, Mr. Swank? I would think not. There you go. And then now's the time for further comment, information from staff, and then questions of staff by commissioners. Staff have anything to say?
Chair and commissioners, we do have item of clarification for the commission before they move into discussion and deliberation. The item before you today, or the initiation before you today, or the request is the two parcels that they wanted to rezone and to establish the business. There's been discussion and inference that other properties in the vicinity that are similarly zoned CH may be interested. And so the clarification for the commission, the item before you at this moment, the request is those two parcels. So then the discussion or the direction that staff and the applicant would have is, would the commission initiate if it's only these two parcels, or is part of the discussion that they'd want all the parcels to come in on an application? But that is not before you today. Brief discussions offline with the director is that it could be that they could be added to the application. But there's no guarantee. There's been references made that the other property owners may want to consider a rezone. So I just wanted to make that clarifying point. I don't mean to rain on anybody's parade today, but I just wanted to make that clear that what the decision or what the action by the commission is today.
I have a follow-up question to that comment, Secretary Wilson, because I was thinking of just that issue. But I don't want to keep coming back for different kinds of hearings and have the board to do it when there's a strong feeling that something in general should go forward. And if this is accepted, it's not an approval today of zoning changes. That comes about somewhere in the future, which is probably pretty far in the future, I suppose, months in the future. And those zoning changes ultimately are approved by the board, right? Or at least an appeal to the board, if not by the board. So the whole issue of spot zoning might very well disappear by then. If we approve this or accept it for processing, it doesn't mean we're approving a spot zoning project, because we're not approving any rezoning. We're just that's just clearly an issue that'll either get resolved some way or the other, or the project won't get where you want it to go with a rezone.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, that is correct. Ultimately, the rezone general plan amendment is a legislative act and would go to the Board of Supervisors for decision on the rezone and general plan redesignation. Again, as Mr. Seawards and staff has indicated, there's a lot of unknowns today, especially the urban rural boundary line, adjusting it if that's necessary or not, allowed uses in the commercial or C3 zone. So there is a lot of unanswered questions today that we would want to explore. And so, yes, today is really for the commission to accept the application and direct staff to process it.
Okay. Any other questions of staff before we move on to deliberations?
Chair Park, if I could, I think Mr. Singer or Mr. Baylor, they want to clarify just a few other things, and we understand you guys have a lot of discretion, but just making sure you guys are clear on all the data.
Oh, sure. We
Mr.
want to hear
Singer.
from you.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you. Yes, Chair Park, just some other items to touch on quickly. One of them is, the highway commercial zone has been discussed and where it is and the kind of uses allowed in urban versus rural. Just wanted to bring up that some of the other, limited areas of highway commercial in the county, including the area up on Betaravia that Mr. Wilson mentioned earlier, are in the rural area currently. So though, we've had discussion of, it's an urban zone in a rural area on this site, this is not exclusive of this, the other areas of highway commercial are also located in rural areas, or some of them are. A little bit more discussion on this policy LUO-6 in the Orchid Community Plan. It is pretty explicit that the urban rural boundaries shall not be extended until existing inventories of vacant land are nearing build out. We do not consider the Orchid community to be nearing build out yet. A lot of the key sites, including some of the larger ones like key site 22, 26, 15, those are all not built out. They don't even have submitted applications on them for build out yet. So we really don't consider the Orchid area nearing build out just yet. So that policy 6 would need to be amended to move this urban boundary if that's what's required. And then again, just as Mr. Wilson touched on, bringing in those other properties is different than what's before you, and would require some additional review and would not necessarily have to happen if you accept it today. It could go to the board without those properties or with them as is decided in the process. Thank you.
Chair Park. I have a question for Mr. Singer.
Yes, Commissioner Farini.
Thank you for the infill information, Mr. Singer. You were referring to the Betaravia Road east of 101 property zoned as HC, and it's in the rural zone, correct?
Chair Farini Commissioner Farini through the chair. That is correct.
Okay. And then through your eyes, though, do you see that there is some difference in these two areas, the one before us versus the Betaravia site? The big one seems to be the presence of the new school. Actually, eastward, it's actually leapfrogged between the freeway and the parcels we're discussing. Where that puts it, do you see that differently, or does that just stay rural in your eyes?
Commissioner Farini, I think that's definitely an important point. And I think from the standards of the code that I'm a little bit more limited to than the Planning Commission is, it does not change the urban rural status. When I look at the property, it's still in the rural area. Even the property of the school is still in the rural area. But I think that's a very important consideration for the Planning Commission to take into account on whether or not you feel this could be accepted. Something that is actually maybe a little bit more similar to the Betaravia highway commercial that we've talked about is it's also next to sections of industrial zoned properties, which is generally also a urban land use. So you could make a similar claim that those properties have urban uses near them, similar to the school for this property.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sewers, I heard that Mr. Singer and Ms. Byler and you all had things to comment on, or did Mr. Singer cover them all? Okay. Then let us go into deliberations then. Who would like to speak up first? Mr. Cooney, do you have something to say before I forget that you're here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would prefer to hear from Commissioner Farini as closest to this particular issue. And I'll continue to listen until I hear from the rest of the commission.
Sounds good. By the way, I looked at the documents this morning and I couldn't figure out what district it's in. And then when I asked Commissioner Farini, he says it's in mine, because he always says that whenever it's a difficult project, but it is in the 4th district, right? Okay, so why don't you go first?
Okay, Commissioner Bradley, would you like to go first, or do you want me to go?
I could, because my perspective is probably different.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm going to be.
You go first.
I'm going to be pure planner today. And so I really appreciate staff's work on making, this is actually a fairly complicated thing. Partially because we weren't here when the Orchid Community Plan was done, partially because I appreciate how staff has highlighted that this was all zoned and designated for the success of the Elks Rodeo. And that was several decades ago, and maybe that's not what's happening now. But it makes complete sense if the rodeo was foreseen as something that was going to prosper and bring its own little ag tourism nucleus, that this would have made sense. It's just that it hasn't worked out that way, apparently. So then you're stuck with this, zone that's not actually being used that way. And then this morning when we school, I'm like, oh yeah, well, that makes it more complicated. So I'm probably okay with the shift in the general plan designation. I really don't want to see it on just one parcel, just this case. As much as I want to support Mr. Penza and this business, I really think for good planning, we should try to get the whole chunk of that Quayside 33 in for one general plan amendment application. And I don't know how complicated that is to sign up the other landowners, but I think that's a really important thing, because then I could defend that, well, yeah, it was all meant for the Elks Rodeo, but that hasn't panned out the way it is. And now we've got the school. So with all the landowners doing it, then it would be compliant with the land use Orchid 6, which is, here it says right here, it would allow development of the commercial building, but you have to do a major community plan update and not a site by site one. So that's really very important for me on this case. And I don't know, there's probably no other factor. I mean, the land use makes sense. The site makes sense. I think it's going to be a good development project. I appreciate that the, business wants to stay here, and that's all good. But I'm very hesitant to change these community plans for one parcel at a time, even though I understand why this is such an awkward, situation that we're facing. So I'm not sure if that helped or hindered or just left more questions out there, but that's my thinking. I'd support it if we had all of the parcels in front of us.
Okay, now, and thank you, Commissioner Briley. Commissioner Freeney.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've got to hear a lot today. One of the original thoughts in the Orchid Community Plan was that was to support the Elks migration to this new spot. Previously, the Elks Rodeo Ground was in the center of Santa Maria, and the fair renamed itself a fair park, and they really had outgrown the use of the rodeo there. The rodeo originally was kind of the centerpiece of the fairgrounds, and then as legislation changed how fairs are funded, they had to come up with more uses, and it actually ended up that the rodeo was kind of harming their ability to diversify, if you will. So it was with mutual benefit and respect of both parties that the Elks then moved out to what was called the Unocal Event Center, and the Elks developed that, and away they go. When we see HC Highway Commercial, right, and it talks about hotels and these supports. If you go on site, and unfortunately no one is here from the Elks to bear witness for us, so I'll just give you a little boots on the ground, if you will. Is over the years, with technology, these pickups have become more powerful, and they haul bigger trailers now. So when you see a rodeo guy or girl come into the fairgrounds, they have these big, beautiful trailers that actually have housing in the front. I think Chair Park, you may have one of these. And
It's not beautiful.
and no, I wouldn't dare accuse you of that. But these, these professional competitors, that they're on the road all the time. So they have living quarters there. they have portable corrals there. They want to be with they want their horses nearby. They don't really want to go stay in a hotel. So if we look at the Elks, what they've done is they've set that up so that the kind of an RV park ground, and I think they have plans to further develop that in the future to support the current need, right? Same thing, if you look, they have their own concession stands and everything else. So they want everybody to eat there and buy their cowboy hats there, or whatever it is, that's how they work. So I think, as we look at this, that it has become this CH or HC has become somewhat obsolete for the area and the intent that was under the Orchid Community Plan. As we can also witness, nobody's jumped in saying, hey, I want to build a hotel here, or a fast food drive-through, or a coffee shop, or anything like that. And a lot of that has to do with the traffic flow of this area. It's a little bit quirky. And some years ago, it came before the Planning Commission. I think we approved for it to move forward, was to have this frontage road eventually connect with Union Valley Parkway. And Union Valley Parkway is a superior facility, if you will, for on-ramp and off-ramp of safely moving traffic. It has a much better design than the Santa Maria Way area. So I would say someday if they need hotels or more fast food, probably going to be closer to that area. We are dealing with an old community plan that I think years ago was not able to contemplate the evolution, if you will, of the neighborhood. I really look at this with the school going in. It's a highly desirable and needed facility for the community. And overall, I think everyone's thankful that the school district put the project there, and it will benefit, like I say, the community and students who want to go into more vocational aspects of the job market, which that too is highly desirable. We don't just need college graduates, right? So that kind of leaves me with one other thing I did want to touch on was the property right now is underutilized. And to me, that points to the zoning is not what is needed by the community. I like the idea of this project in particular because it's not in a high traffic area. So there again, it would actually be, it's in the middle of town right now, makes it a little bit harder to get to, and we have to run big trucks in town to get pipe. I'd rather go right there off the freeway, grab my pipe or parts, whatever we need, and then get back out to the farm, if you will. So I think that's a big benefit long range. I agree with Commissioner Bridley. I would like to see the whole area, all of the owners in together. But I think at this point, I'd like to see the project be accepted into P&D and move forward and get all of those things in order. I would hope that the applicant hears this commission, right? And we don't have a majority vote yet, but at least is that you would need to bring all those properties in. It just wouldn't make sense not to. And Mr. Seward shaking his head yes at me. So if staff says that, and oh, nodding, he's nodding. Okay. Oh, shaking is no. All right. And Commissioner Briley, with her experience in planning, feels that same way. So I'm ready to move forward. Look forward to hearing from Commissioner Cooney and Chair Park.
Commissioner Cooney, you ready to go, or you want me to go first?
I'll be brief and give you more time to fill in the cracks. If it's okay with you. I will say I agree with Commissioner Farini and with Commissioner Bridley. They both made persuasive arguments for their positions, and it's exactly where I find myself is that if we could ignore the planning process and just look forward and imagine what the project would do for the benefit of the community, I think we'd be able to close our eyes to some of the issues, the critical issues that would be involved between here and there. The purpose of my question to Mr. Swank was, what is the big deal if we simply follow the director's recommendation and send this to the board right now for what is a critical part of this entire process, and that is the community plan amendment. I can't see moving ahead with the current community plan and just say, well, things have evolved sufficiently. So with the addition of the school location, we could shoehorn this project in somehow. I agree that Commissioner Farini has his hand on the pulse of this area and the ag practices in the North County specifically. And I hope that personally that the applicant sticks with it and we can get there, but not without first going through, I think, the Board of Supervisors. So from a planning standpoint, I feel I can't support the request today. Maybe modifications to it with a follow-up would come back first to the commission, but today I would have to vote no.
I'm thinking a little differently. I think there's a tension here. I wouldn't quite call it a conflict. And the tension is, on the one side, you have documents and you want to honor those. And that includes the Orchid Community Plan, the process for initiation, the current zoning issue over the boundary lines, urban-rural boundary, et cetera. And then, but it's the tension between that and what's good overall planning for today's conditions. And you have to weigh those. I'm mindful here that when I look at what I consider to be some antiquated elements of our general plan, and I include almost all the community plans because they're old, and I include many of our elements. The land use element, open space element are getting some revision right now as part of the countywide recreation master plan effort. I think the conservation element is so antiquated that it sometimes undermines instead of aids conservation. Our general plan is important. That's our job as planning commissioners, to deal with it, recommend changes, enforce it. But I'm mindful it's, not one of the four gospels. It's not the US Constitution. It does not have some incredible intrinsic merit as a cultural artifact for us. It's just something we operate under. I am confident that in service of the goal of good planning, that we can accept the initiation of this project, and these necessary amendments or things that need to happen under our antiquated documents will catch up. As an example there, when we speak to the spot zoning issue. I mean, I get that, but I can't conceive that Foursquare, which is trying to rid itself of that parcel and obtain the most money it can for the sale of it, would want to interfere with the change to C3 zoning, because that's where the customers are going to come to buy that parcel. They're not going to say no. The Icola property, we've had their property manager come before us a few moments ago saying, what a great idea this is. Why would the Icolas say no? It's going to happen. We don't need to have another hearing. We don't need to bother the Board of Supervisors with another hearing. We don't need to keep spending staff time being paid for by the applicants to go back and forth. We should just go forward. The initiation process, we've had 3 of them in the last month or 2 come in front of us. We've had none come otherwise in my tenure on the Planning Commission. It is, to call it a loosey-goosey process would be, it's not an over-exaggeration. It's what exactly is it? So I think we can accept it and have it keep moving, whatever it goes, and all these issues will be resolved before it reaches some kind of ultimate decision time. So I don't think we have to resolve every potential issue, every potential objection to this rezone right now. Okay, those things will get worked out. As far as the good planning thing, I was very pleased today, or impressed, to hear about the benefits of C3 zoning for this area and for the community. I hadn't thought about that very well. It reminds me, long ago, I was executor for an estate where we had some property that was outside of the Santa Maria area. It was beautiful property, very productive, not much different farm property than Santa Maria area property. And it was clear that it was appraising it quite a bit less. And the reason why is that Santa Maria Valley has support facilities for agriculture, and that makes agriculture more productive here and the property worth more. And so if we want to support agriculture, we have to support those support facilities. I recall when I was nominated to come on this commission, I had a conversation with Peter Adam, and I said, I may look like some kind of long-haired hippie left-wing guy, but I really support agriculture. And he said, well, just don't put it in a snow globe. And that's a Peter talk. And what he meant was, it's not all about just pretty green fields out there with horses and women in bonnets and things. It's about making it work, and it's you got to do that. And then when I joined the commission, Commissioner Farini and Claire Weinman took me for a trip, wandering around the county, showing me that support facilities are as important a part of agriculture as the fields and so forth. And I get it. It seems to me we're not doing it right now. We need to have this not highway commercial. We don't need more Chevron stations along every exit, Pappy's, as much as I like going to Pappy's. We need to have places to have irrigation equipment and piping and all that. And they need to be near the highway. The alternative is to say, well, yeah, go get a CUP and put FAMCO 3 miles out into the farm country and take up an Ag 2 property that otherwise really ought to be irrigated and growing crops. No, the right place for this facility is right where they want to put it. So we've got an area that's with the high school and with other uses. It's going to be completely compatible. It's not going to be ag property. I would guess that Mr. Penza will get tired of barking dogs at some point, but at least the pipes won't disintegrate. And I guess not. I even look at that parcel Foursquare has, and I get back to housing. You could do a builder's remedy project out there and have you could, and within 60 days, you'd have approval, okay, because you wouldn't take architectural review or other discretion review. And you could have a project out there that would provide housing for the school teachers and maintenance people at that high school. and for the families that'll come work at FAMCO and all that. Look, there are other good uses, other C3 uses, but it's just worth thinking about. And that's what good planning is to me, is talking about how do we plan for today's circumstances as opposed to how religiously do we adhere to documents that are capable of being changed and which require motivation to be brought up to date. So what I would want to do actually is to accept this right now. Any other deliberation comments, or does somebody want to make a motion, or what do you want to do?
I have one thing. I'm going to stand up for the CH zone district. I had a rezone in the city of Goleta that took a CH zone and actually converted it to, or a public institutional, so we could put a fire station on it, right? But don't forget, the CH zone district is where we might see electric charging stations and, water and restroom stations. So it's not a disastrous and useless thing, but maybe those can all be in a C2 thing when we do some ordinance amendment, because it'll be electric charging station will be the new gas station in the next, 20 years. So that's my last.
Of course, if we look at where the charging stations are, because I'm always finding them for my wife's electric car, they're at shopping centers and big institutions like that. They're not at gas stations. But you're right.
It should be. It's a lunch conversation. Never mind.
Well, just curious though. So if you think that through on the charging stations, won't gas stations eventually be converting to charging stations? They-
Yeah, and I
so
read.
You won't really need new.
Right,
They're
just
going to,
convert
they're going
this.
to evolve.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was a big article in the Planning Advisory Service about how our right of way should rethink itself, because you're for apartments in density and with all our housing where you don't have a garage anymore, you need to have charging stations on your curb. And that doesn't, so your ADA access and everything else. I'm getting completely off topic, but that's the future. Sorry.
I think what you're saying is the future won't get simpler,
No.
right?
The
And
Solomon Hills project was last time. Go ahead, Commissioner.
well, I think that kind of adds on to what Commissioner Park was saying is there is a need now, right? And this is a great location for it. So I would like to take this opportunity to make the motion to accept the general plan amendment and rezone applications for processing.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
That's not the enthusiasm I observed when I walked.
I'm
see
happy
walking
to
in.
second that after such a good discussion. It was a great discussion. I'm
very good.
convinced.
Any further discussion or deliberation on the motion itself?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Cooney.
could I just make one comment?
Absolutely. Make two
Um,
comments.
No, what I think is missing from our discussion so far, in the interest of moving ahead, and we have a very desirable applicant and a need from the community for services that are rendered at the present time somewhere else. I think we are rushing, trying to rush a project or speed up a project to fruition, which is really a false hope. We're going to have to end up with so many issues decided that the Board of Supervisors is going to get involved, and certainly with the community plan, ultimately deciding what goes where. My observation of the area in question, along with the whole east side of the highway, is let's figure out what we want long term. Let's do a community plan that takes into account all of the issues that have been raised. And I don't think there's much difference practically which way we go today, but I can't in good conscience say that this isn't a very, very important decision. It isn't just a church, which might turn into residential area or who knows what in that particular area, but it is the essence of spot zoning. That is, we're jumping ahead, leapfrogging significant development that needs to be planned better, and it's going to take longer. So I can't support the motion.
I'd like to address that because it brings up another point that's kind of driving my decision anyway. And I think everything that Commissioner Cooney just said makes a lot of sense. But it's all a matter of timing. You know, there used to be an argument in economics as to whether fiscal theory, John Maynard Keynes' theories were important or not. And they said, in the long run, we'll all get there anyway. And he said, and in the long run, we'll all be dead. And that was, often quoted. And here, I do want to have some consistency in how we work. And I'm minded of another quote, Ralph Waldo Emerson, about consistency is a little inconsistency is the hobgoblin of small minds. But nevertheless, I want to be consistent in some way in how we deal with these initiation projects that rarely come in front of us. I'm mindful that a month ago, talk about a leapfrogging project, we looked at a whole new city that would be 4,000 homes a mile or two away from anything. And it, to go forward, would require an enormous change in just everything under the sun, a recreation of a whole new urban boundary, and changes in various elements, maybe in the OCP. And we said, we're not making any approval of the project. There even isn't exactly a project in front of us. Let's go ahead and allow initiation because it's the simplest thing to do in a sense. And let's not send this big mess up to the board to deal with it, along with some kind of recommendation. And I don't know how you debate a recommendation. Let's just do the simple thing and accept it for initiation. And it'll go through its process, and maybe it'll work out to be a good thing or maybe a bad thing. I look at putting a C3 in an area that's so obvious for there on a little parcel that's bounded by a high school and other things for a use that's so clearly beneficial to the area right now. I think that's a lot easier project to vote yes for than the one we voted yes for last month. And so even though I am inconsistent at times, the consistency tells me I do want to go ahead and vote for this motion, notwithstanding Commissioner Cooney's well-considered comments. Any other deliberation? Then shall we go ahead with a roll call vote, because Commissioner Cooney is appearing remotely.
Commissioner Cooney,
Mr. Chair, let's take the vote and we'll see if we have any further action we're required to take. I'll vote no on the motion before the commission.
Commissioner Bradley,
Yes.
Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Chair Park,
Aye.
motion passes 3-1.
Can I, just as a follow-up, when this application comes back, and if I'm still sitting here, I will really look carefully about whether it includes the whole Keyside 33. I think you guys have.
Your microphone is not on, Laura.
Okay.
When this comes back for its actual general plan consideration, I hope that the applicant is going to come back with everybody on the application. So you've got the green light. Thank you.
Probably not that easy to work with churches and other landowners and pick who makes the decisions, but let's go ahead and do that. That makes sense. I think that comes from all of us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, but hang on, folks, a little bit, because Commissioner Cooney had a comment to make on this process, and and what else we may need to do. And I think we need to hear him out before everybody kind of wanders off. Commissioner Cooney, I'm queuing you up.
Mr. Chair, unfortunately, Commissioner Bridley did not have her microphone on, so I didn't hear a word she said. In essence, what was she suggesting?
She was suggesting, well, let me just speak to it, that when this next comes before the commission, it should be clear as a bell, didn't use that phrase, but that all of the other landowners in that area, which would be the Icola property and the church property, have joined in the application so that we're not dealing with this spot zoning issue. Is that a fair summary of your comment? And I think that the rest of us agree with that. But I wanted you to have the opportunity to make the point that you were going to make right before we voted.
I was going to work on the recommendation to the board, but there's no need.
Okay. Well, then I think we're done with this matter. Is that correct? Okay. I see all these nodding heads, not shaking heads, nodding heads. And so we shall adjourn.